Hello everyone, Rich Hagan and Randy Buehler here as part of your lunchtime entertainment here at Pro Tour Fate Reforged. The players are refueling and re-sleeving because Modern is just around the corner. And that means, Randy, we get to talk about the best cards in Modern. But why don't we start with some honorable mentions?
Yeah, I put together a top 15, which obviously things are changing. This field is totally wide open. I could have done a top 25. I was going to be wrong about some of these no matter what I did. But I definitely did want to call out some honorable mentions that aren't going to be in the list, but that I think may have an impact here. You know, Grave Troll, I don't think it's going to show up, but it's newly unbanned, so it is the kind of card. I'm sure everybody tried to see if they could break it. Amular Vigor, not hard to break that one. It's just how consistent are you? I do think Tasigur is good enough to make the cut. I think we are going to see some Tasigur the Golden Fang, new Fate Reforged card running around. And the card on here I think we'll see the most of is the Goblin Guide.
Right.
The burn deck has just been skyrocketing in popularity on Magic Online, and I do think that we're going to see people just showing up with lava spikes this tournament.
Well, if those are 8 cards or 8 sets of cards that aren't in the top 15, there must be some very special things. Let's get to number 15, and it is Delver of Secrets.
So I started with Delver here, more to talk about what has changed and what has left the format than anything else. The Delver of Secrets, because of the banning of Treasure Cruise, this deck was the deck in Modern like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Everybody had to expect Delver showing up. People were playing cards just to hose the Delver decks and Chalice of the Void. Delver of Secrets as a Magic card is basically gone from this field. That's the interesting story here. You won't see Delver. What you're going to see is all those Delver decks have turned into just burn decks. You take the Delvers, you start playing Goblin Guides, you start playing Monastery Swift Spears, you take that young Pyromancer burn suite that you had before, and it's not, without Treasure Cruise, it's not actually worth splashing the blue. So that's more of the like reputation, let's talk about this guy and sort of have a moment of silence for the departure of our friend, the Fly.
Okay, number 14 is Pyromancer Ascension.
Yeah, the Storm deck has just been a constant in Modern. You know, it's one of those, the litmus test for how good Storm is probably going to be to see if Finkel's playing it, because John Finkel seems to love this deck. You know, if Pantheon is playing Storm, you could see a lot of Storm go pretty deep. If they're not, maybe they think the metagame has shifted away from it, but this is the card that keeps that archetype going. You know, Wizards has banned several cards over the years out of the Storm deck, and somehow Storm keeps showing up as that, like, you know, 7th most played and 3rd best winning percentage kind of a combo archetype. It's definitely one of the combo archetypes that people are thinking in terms of, that people might go to, and that's the card that stitches it all together.
All right, so watch out for John Finkel and the Pantheon. Will they be on Storm? Number 13 is a removal spell, a big removal spell. It's Anger of the Gods.
So if you look at the stats from the last Modern Pro Tour, and you look at cards that cost more than 2 mana, this was the most played card on that list. It was everywhere. This was the removal spell. It could sweep away the pod creatures, you know, not as important anymore, obviously, but it could sweep away all the zoo creatures as well. And so if you're trying to attack with aggressive creatures, this is the card you're constantly living in fear of. It's, you know, it's not the sexiest card. It's not like anybody's playing an Anger of the Gods deck, but it is floating around in sideboards and main decks, and it's the kind of thing everybody who wants to attack with weenies has to be worried about.
Number 12 is very interesting to me because I feel it gives a lot of barometer on the format, just how good it is. Number 12 is Thoughtseize.
Oh yeah. Thoughtseize, the ability for 1 mana to just strip the most powerful card out of your opponent's hand is very good. You'll see this showing up in Abzan midrange decks. You may also see a recurrence of Fairies decks. We haven't really seen Fairies in Modern ever since the unbanning of Bitter Blossom, but maybe. I'm hearing some whispers. So Thoughtseize is definitely the kind of card that makes you want to play sort of an attrition-y or control-ish black-based deck.
I want to ask you about the last sentence on that card.
Sure.
You lose 2 life. Modern is a format where life totals that begin at 20 often don't stay at 20 for very long.
Sure.
How important should people who are coming new to Modern this afternoon with us, how carefully should they be watching the scoreboard and going, he just lost 2 life there, and now he's paying 2 life on Thoughtseize.
Right.
How big is that 2 life?
It depends whether the other guy has Goblin Guides and Lava Spikes.
Right.
Like, part of the reason I think you are seeing Burn become this big fixture in the metagame is so many people are so cavalier with their life total. Fetch land, you know, shock land, pay 2 life, Thoughtseize you can go to 15 on the first turn. Easily. Crack a fetch land, you know, get your shock land, cast Thoughtseize. If you do that on the first turn and your opponent shows you like Goblin, Lava Spike, Lightning Bolt, Goblin Guide, Monastery Swift Spear, you're dead.
Right.
So it matters in some of the matchups. Some of the matchups, yeah, you just want to be able to strip the card. So it's a very matchup dependent thing, but I mean, that's a big deal. It's a lot of what's going on here is that those mono red players are gambling that they don't need to deal 20, they only need to deal like 15.
Well, it's possible that people casting number 12 will be taking away number 11, because number 11 is Wild McCallum.
Sure. Yeah, this is the best creature you can summon on the first turn. Wild McCallum hits hard. The fetch land, shock land mana bases that all the Zoo decks have means this guy starts out as a 3/3. He's very good. I do think you'll see some Zoo decks running around. Yeah, it's just a good, solid creature that is going to be a staple of the format however long it's legal.
I don't want to get too deep, but Zoo encompasses a lot of different things, and we've had people playing Big Zoo and Little Zoo,
Right.
And what was Josh Utter-Layton's version of
Oh,
Zoo that's
Counter
running
Cat.
blue? Counter Cat and so on. Do you get a sense of what flavor is flavor of the month, Zoo-wise?
I think it's Tribal Zoo. I think Tribal Flames. So
Right.
you've got all the colors. You can Tribal Flames for 5. It's definitely playing a lot of colors, 3, 4, even 5 colors. You just get to grab the best aggressive cards you can from any of the colors. Maybe even get some Snapcaster Mages in there. Certainly you can go to white for some powerful creatures. You can put Geist of St. Traft in your Zoo deck if you want to. Like the mana base, you're basically saying I'm fast enough that I don't care about my life total, and you can do a lot of powerful things with the mana that's available in this format.
All right, so we are into the top 10, and you mentioned mana there. Mana bases do not like number 10.
This format goes back to like 8th and 9th edition. There are some powerful hoser cards in those early core sets for Modern, and nothing is more hosey than Blood Moon. We saw Li Tian make top 8 of the last Modern Pro Tour with basically a Blood Moon deck. I mean, Blue Moon was that deck, and everyone kind of has to be aware. It'll ebb and flow. It's sometimes the Blood Moon decks are really good. Sometimes people are playing it safer with their mana bases. I mean, there's enough fetch lands that you can kind of get some basics, but this is just everybody has to be aware that their opponent can just show up and Blood Moon them. What do you do if your opponent plays Blood Moon? It's something everybody who's building a deck for this Pro Tour has to ask themselves, what do I do if somebody shows up and Blood Moons me? Very powerful card.
And in particular, looking again at what's on the screen there, we think of it as a sideboard card. What made it so powerful in Li Chan's Blue Moon deck, it was main deck.
Absolutely.
So you're saying, what am I going to do about it? Well, I'm going to sideboard this against it. But wait, not in game 1 you're not. You're just, and I wonder how many Blood Moons we're going to see main deck at this tournament. Li Chan's in the field. We'll see what happens. All right, on we go to number 9, and it's Planeswalker time. Here comes Liliana of the Veil.
Yeah, and she may be underrated at 9th. She is very powerful. You know, some people will tell you she's the best card in the Obzon deck, which if I had to pick a card that I thought was going to be the deck that's the biggest percentage of the metagame here, it would be that Obzon deck. She doesn't really show up anywhere else, which is why I've only got her 9th, quote unquote, only got her at 9th, but knocking cards out of people's hand is good when you're playing that kind of grindy attrition deck. Killing their creature is really good. She just, for 3 mana, she can single-handedly take over a game, so very powerful card.
In general, is Modern a Planeswalker format in the way that Standard very frequently is, or obviously Limited is? Is it?
Not as much, just because they tend to be more expensive.
Right.
There's so many powerful things you can do for 1 mana, 2 mana. You don't really have Planeswalkers at those mana costs, right?
Sure.
And the Liliana's the one showing up because she's only 3.
Right, okay. So we're not really looking in a world of Garrux and Elspeths at 5 and 6, for the most part.
I mean, you'll see a couple around the edges, but they're around the edges.
All right, next up we go to Artifact Land, and we go to the world of Affinity, Arcbound Ravager.
Yeah, I mean, this slide could just as easily have been Cranial Plating. You know, the pairing of Arcbound Ravager and Cranial Plating alongside a deck full of nothing but artifacts is super, super good. Even without the artifact lands that are on the ban list, this is arguably the best sort of linear aggressive deck that you can play. Game 1, it is the best aggro deck in the field. The only problem is that your deck being all artifacts makes you vulnerable to some of the sideboard cards that other people can show up with against you.
Let's put color back into the mix. We go to blue, and we go to the 2/1 that could Snapcaster Mage.
So good. I mean, anybody who wants to play a Lightning Bolt, play a Path of Exile, and then recurse it. Like you get a 2/1 creature, you get to replay your, cheap, whether it's a removal spell or a counter spell. Just really one of the reasons to want to play blue in this format, and one of the reasons to want to play for sort of the mid game or the late game.
Tiago Chan, of course, the invitational winner you see there. So that's a player from mostly the mid-2000s. So he was around. That was his prize for winning that. But we are into our top 6. Now, lands are very important, but usually not as a centerpiece, just as a facilitator. But our number 6 is very much a card that is a centerpiece of a deck.
Absolutely. I mean, Valakut is so powerful that, I mean, it was banned at one point in Modern. And since it's come back, the Scapeshift deck is usually the best deck that you can build around Valakut. But, I mean, just Primeval Titan to go get lands in Valakuts can be good enough. And you see some people sort of playing Primeval Titan decks that aren't even necessarily Scapeshift. Scapeshift, though, you go get Valakut and 5 or 6 mountains. You're great. You just can win the game for 4 mana by having this card in your deck and building your deck around it. That is one of the dominant combo decks in this field. Maybe not number 1, but on the short list of decks that everybody is aware of and trying to make sure that they have game against.
Now, is Scapeshift a deck that great players gravitate towards? Is there a lot of play to a Scapeshift deck?
There is, in that the best builds of Scapeshift tend to be blue, and they tend to have, enough permission to slow your opponent down, enough deck manipulation to go sort of searching out the pieces you need. We saw a lot of Team Channel Fireball playing Scapeshift at the last Modern Pro Tour. So yeah, I mean, we've seen good players play it. We've seen it do well at the Grand Prix circuit. It didn't do all that well in Valencia, but I mean, new metagame. We'll see what happens here.
All right, we're into the top 5. It's as clean as it gets at number 5. Bang, lightning bolt.
Kill it. 3 damage to a creature, and we're going to see this a lot, 3 damage to your face. And then Snapcaster and do 3 more damage to your face. I mean, decks with Lightning Bolt, it is just the premium removal spell in the format. Everybody knows, if you want to kill something for 1 mana, okay, there's Path to Exile running around, but Lightning Bolt is just the premier removal spell, and the fact that it doubles as player removal definitely comes up.
And so that Lightning Bolt is going to feature, obviously it's going to feature in the burn decks, but it's also potentially...
It's in the Zoo decks, it's in the Jeskai control decks.
I was going to say, right at the other end.
It's in the Splinter Twin decks.
Right.
It shows up in combo, it shows up in control, it shows up in aggro. It's
Which
everywhere.
explains 32 Lightning Bolts in the top 8 of a GP.
There you go.
All right, we're on to number 4. We go back to lands, and now not just one card, but basically the glue of the format.
Absolutely. I think you've said it exactly right. The one thing that stitches this format together, the thing that your first impression and your last impression of the format, it's about the mana. What can you do with your colored mana base? Are you willing to take pain? Okay, well, you can play pretty much anything you want between the fetch lands and then the shock lands that can be gotten with the fetch lands. You can put together mana bases to cover just about any kind of deck you want to build.
Is one of the excitements to burn players the thought that they can run 18 mountains? Is that like a plus point within the format?
I think the burn players, I mean, they're fine splashing for white. I don't think they will run 18 mountains.
Okay.
I think you're like, Boros Charm deals 4 damage. Why don't I just put some fetch lands and some shock lands into my deck
So
too?
Arid Maces are going in all the mono red decks, as it were.
I think so, yeah.
Right, okay.
They're
So-
excited that fetch lands are in everybody else's decks. That's what they're excited about.
Indeed. So we're down to our top 3. I wonder if you can work out what they are. Here is number 3. It is combo heaven or combo hell, depending on your viewpoint. It's Splinter Twin.
Yeah, I expect the Splinter Twin decks to be the most played combo decks in the field, and I think maybe this is one of the few decks that I think could actually crack 10% of this totally wide open metagame. I think you'll see plenty of Splinter Twin. I mean, the fact is, if your opponent just, casts a 3-drop or, taps out on turn 4, you just kill them. End step, here comes my Deceiver Exarch, untap, put Splinter Twin onto Deceiver Exarch. Now I can just tap it to make a copy, to untap it, tap it to make a copy, to untap it. That kill comes seemingly out of nowhere, and it feels like they have nothing, and then they're just end step, make a guy, untap, make a Splinter Twin. It comes out, and everybody has to be constantly on guard. You'll see people who's like, why isn't he playing his spell? Why isn't he playing Liliana on turn 3? Well, he's afraid his opponent's just going to kill him if he does.
Probably the most famous modern player of Splinter Twin is Patrick Dickman.
Yes.
In various guises.
Yes.
And one of his signature moves is a willingness to never, essentially, cast that combo. It is simply the existence of the combo that opens it up for him to beat opponents in apparently relatively fair ways. So it's this sort of Damocles.
Oh, no,
over
it's a
the
great
format.
point. It's a great point. I mean, if you've got the ability to just kill your opponent out of nowhere, suddenly they're playing cautious, and you just, you lightning bolt them, you play Grim Lavamancer, you can just tempo them out, Vendilion clicked, grab a card, start attacking for 3. Oh, tempo twin, okay, so what if we go to green and we start playing Tarmogoyfs on turn 2, and then never tapping out because you're holding up the ability to stop them. It gives you a lot of flexibility because it's such a powerful combo.
You just said Tarmogoyf. I don't see that anywhere. Why don't we see what's number 2? Aha!
This is going to be a big player. I think Siege Rhinos are going to sit on the top of the curve. For years we've had these black-green decks, right? They were Jund decks when they could play Bloodbraid Elf. They were black-green X. They were just black-green. Maybe you flash white for Lingering Souls. There's now a consensus. Your black-green sort of Liliana Tarmogoyf deck with Abrupt Decay, Siege Rhino is the creature you want to be casting on 4. This is how you want to be attacking your opponent. I think we're going to see lots and lots of Siege Rhinos showing up this weekend.
Does that mean that alongside them, because you've got rid of the red for Jund decks and you're playing white for Abzan, does that mean we're going to see a lot of Lingering Souls?
Yes.
Right? That's...
Absolutely. Just straight up yes.
Okay. Talking to Tom Martell and Brian Kibler in the lobby last night, not sure what they're on, but they were discussing Lingering Souls as just an incredibly powerful card in the format. And that's kind of startling when you realize that we're discussing 1/1s.
Flyers with flying.
Yeah, I know, but still, they're still 1/1s.
You get a lot of them.
I don't think they need the support, Randy. I think they're pretty good anyway. So what is the #1 card in Modern as we come into this Pro Tour?
It's Tarmogoyf.
Of course it
Tarmogoyf
is.
is so good. 2-mana, gigantic creature. I mean, it can be killed, and like everybody knows they're going to need to kill it. So, you'll see Path to Exile, you'll see Abrupt Decays floating around. I mean, it's not unkillable, but you have to kill it, and it only costs them 2 mana. It's good at the early game, it's good in the middle of the game, it's good in the late game. I mean, and because it's 1 and a green, it just goes into so many different decks. I mean, not just Abzan. It'll show up in Zoo decks. It'll show up in Splinter Twin decks. Just can go anywhere and provide you with a super solid attacking body for just 2 mana.
So fundamentally, if we were going to look at Blazing Fast, somewhere in the middle, somewhere at the end, we've got red decks with burn, and maybe some affinity as the like nice and quick
maybe some
aggro.
effects too. I mean, there's 3 or 4 different flavors of aggro that you can play.
Okay, then we've got Abzan in the middle, and then we've got Sean McLaren-esque blue-white-red control up the top.
Yeah, I don't think you'll see a lot of pure control. Like the Jeskai McLaren style can go into the mid-range decks. It's wide open. You're going to see everything, all speeds, all tempos, all decks.
All speeds, all tempos, all decks, all modern, all the time, right here on Magic the Gathering.